Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. Here's what's making news right now.
It's quite scary. It's quite concerning to see the Conservatives co-opt rather than address the structural issues that workers are facing.
I'm not sure where we caught it from. It could have been anywhere. You can't blame anybody for that. It's going around. It happens. I'm just in the unfortunate, I guess, boat, having surgery while having COVID at the same time.
Especially when conditions are like this. Like, it is just, it's a thrill to watch. I mean, my heart is in my throat most of the time he's out there, but it's an absolute thrill to watch.
Thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with what can only be considered a political dressing down. High-level provincial officials have blasted Windsor's acting medical officer of health. In a number of letters, he's being scolded for the now rescinded policy that briefly banned temporary foreign workers from coming to the region. That was because of limited COVID isolation space for workers. Now it's being called discriminatory. Dale Molnar is looking into the story for us and joins me now live. Dale, talk us through the criticism.
Well, Kat, the province had some harsh words for the doctor. The first letter came from Dr. Kieran Moore, the province's chief medical officer of health. That letter, dated January the 18th, accused Dr. Shankar Nesaturi of overstepping his authority in his letter of instruction to employers. In it details Nesaturi, on our read of the letter of instruction, it went beyond instructing on public health measures for the safe operation of businesses and organizations, and instead sought to prohibit one or more aspects of their operation in a manner not consistent with Ontario Regulation 26320. That's the provincial reopening plan. Then on January 21st, Parm Gill, the provincial citizenship and multicultural minister, sent a letter saying Nesaturi was discriminating against the workers. He wrote, "Your direction to halt entry of temporary foreign workers was discriminatory, targeted a vulnerable population that has already been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. These targeted restrictions would have placed undue blame and substantial financial burden on the temporary foreign workers who come to work in Ontario to help put food on our tables." Kat, that policy they're criticizing was short-lived. The health unit walked back the order on January 14th, 3 days after it was issued. After an outcry from the greenhouse industry and after the health unit said local leaders scrambled to find adequate space for isolating the workers. We requested interviews from Nesaturi and CEO Nicole Dupuy today, but were put off until Thursday. Dupuy told us on January 16th the ban was necessary at the time.
You know, as we noted this week and Dr. Nesaturi had spoken to, we were within a 7-day period, triple what our capacity in the isolation and recovery center for agri-food workers that we had locally. We had, I think it holds 115. We were isolating at our highest point in about 100 and, between 120 and 140 people. And we just went from zero, to that in a very, very short period of time. And as well, I think it's no news that certainly our health services as well are strapped and struggling. And so our, intent was we needed, when we've been speaking to it, we needed additional isolation supports.
Now, we reached out to the Justice for Migrant Worker group for a comment on the letters, and they are critical of the government officials for playing politics.
It is concerning that the Conservative government, through Parm Gill, would rather write a letter rather than look at what their own government doing. They're not they rather point fingers than take a hard look in the mirror of what their government has not done to protect this vulnerable community.
Now, lawyer Jim Cook represents some of the greenhouse growers. He says he was glad the provincial authorities agreed with them, but he also had a suggestion for the WeChew board.
This seems to be a pattern with this particular medical officer of health, and I would think under the circumstances with two really unprecedented letters coming from the highest levels of the provincial government that the board may wish to consider a change in leadership.
We reached out to board chair for the health unit, Gary McNamara. He said he could not comment. I did speak, though, with board member Gary Kashik, and he hadn't even heard of the letters until the news reports today. Kat?
Thanks for this, Dale. CBC's Dale Molnar live tonight. A dozen more people in our community have lost their lives due to COVID-19. This is the highest daily death toll in several days. Here's what we can tell you about the people who died. The youngest, a man in his 50s. 3 men and 2 women were in their 60s. 2 men and 1 woman in their 70s. 1 woman in her 70s was from a long-term care or retirement home. The oldest, a man and a woman in their 80s. And as of this morning, 117 people were in hospital with COVID, 16 of those in intensive care. Now, this strain has meant many surgeries have been postponed. However, some are critically important and must go ahead either way. For a Windsor woman, one wrong move on icy ground meant she needed surgery on her ankle. But when she tested positive for COVID, things got complicated.
I was put at the bottom of the list though, so my surgery didn't happen at 3, it happened at 9 p.m. Yeah, so they put me in an isolated room from, well, I guess as soon as they found out till 9 p.m. when they did the surgery. The difference, like I said earlier, was I would have been awake for it. They didn't want to risk putting me under in regards to putting like the trach down my throat when I was put to sleep. So they wanted to do a spinal instead. Long story short, yeah, so they tried to do the spinal. I just kept getting like electric shocks down my leg, which was extremely painful. So after so many attempts and 2 freezes of my back later, the anesthesiologist finally said, like, we're not doing this anymore. And they ended up putting me to sleep. Recovering from that has been a challenge, especially being a mom of 4 young kids. I tested my kids the following day. So that Saturday later on, I tested all of them and they all came back positive for COVID. When I was there yesterday, for symptoms related to COVID, I was having a really hard time breathing. And I have been fighting off fevers, and it was confusing because I didn't know if my fevers were COVID related or if I have an infection in my cast due to like the incision. But I was there for 9 hours. It was the longest. I ended up leaving, unfortunately. I couldn't do it anymore. I think everything was I was defeated. Like, I'm defeated. I know they're trying their hardest. It was busy yesterday. I know it was busy. I sat and watched how busy it was. And I know they're short staffed, so I get that. And I'm sure they're tired and defeated as well. I think everybody's just kind of now feeling the effects after these long 2 years of so I don't want to cry. Everything going on. You know, it's been a lot. It's affected us a lot. It's affected me a lot in regards to my business. It's the reason why I went back to school, to support my kids and try to help them. And now this.
Windsor Regional Hospital stresses that regardless of COVID status, all patients will be treated. No more tarps or duct tape holding a field hospital together. Windsor Regional Hospital officials hope the region's new mega hospital means they won't need to treat patients outside of its walls ever again. The new build will come with empty space to allow for surge capacity in emergencies or pandemics.
In fact, some of the new hospitals have even shelled in a complete floor to add, 2 inpatient units or space for 2 inpatient units. And then, of course, we could proceed with fitting them out, constructing the rooms and equipping all of the rooms in a much shorter period of time than if we were to try to add another floor on top of the hospital.
The goal is, as we move forward, we don't want to have to open up, quote, field hospitals. We don't want tarps and duct tape as being the way we provide care. And that's what the new hospital brings and the opportunity. So aside from just that, as Paul indicated, you want to create your space within the existing facilities. So if you do need to ramp up, the space is on site. Other new hospitals had that opportunity to do that. We, of course, did not. We had to go to a field hospital.
Those extra beds and empty spaces would be fully equipped with ICU capabilities, ready to open up, as well as inpatient beds. The unused space would also be a part of long-term needs and projections up to 2038. Right now, the project is in stage 2, so that means the team is planning what programs, staffing, and equipment are needed for the new facility. Officials hope to have shovels in the ground by the summer of 2026. That is 4.5 years away. Some consumers in the Greater Toronto area are saying anecdotally they are seeing empty grocery store shelves. There's fear the vaccine mandate for truckers is just one of a number of factors that could be behind this problem. Chris Glover reports.
The obvious examples is when you walk to a meat section and there's hardly any meat.
In the last 2 weeks in particular, Brian Secandi is finding empty shelves at his South Etobicoke grocery store, and what is left on store shelves is costing him way more.
It's just creating a sense of a bit of an anxiety to kind of be like, will this get worse?
If you walk into a grocery store and you see empty shelves, thank Justin Trudeau.
The federal Conservatives are convinced the problem is the Liberals' new requirement that truckers crossing into Canada from the U.S. are vaccinated. The Canadian Trucking Alliance estimates some 26,000 regular cross-border truckers would be taken off the road due to the mandate.
That's kind of been the third pillar that has been toppled over and which is kind of creating these constraints.
University of Toronto employment relations professor Rafael Gomez says the mandates are toppling an already shaky situation. The years-long global supply chain crisis spurred on by the pandemic is pushing truckers to carry more lucrative products instead of food. Plus, a pre-existing labor shortage means any loss of truckers is more likely to be felt. And tack on the wild card of last Monday's epic winter storm.
Add to this sort of perfect storm is the mandates, which came into effect right in January, which is for Canada really important because most of our fresh food during the winter months only comes from the south.
He says the mandate should be revisited, and the Canadian Federation of Independent Grocers agrees.
We're in uncharted waters, and there are so many different things impacting our supply chain. To add another layer, which we've now done, is just going to cause more disruption. And ultimately, the bottom line is it's going to lead to more cost.
I think a lot of people have to realize that there's a human cost to all of this.
Secandi just worries amid debates over vaccine mandates and global supply crises, consumers like him are getting forgotten. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
Across the Atlantic, London police say they are investigating possible COVID-19 lockdown breaches at the UK Prime Minister's office and residence in 2020. It's another political blow for Boris Johnson, who has been facing growing calls to resign. The anger is over allegations that he and his staff attended multiple parties, even as his fellow citizens were banned from all indoor social gatherings. Margaret Evans has more.
High noon seems to have come and gone again for Boris Johnson more than once in recent days. This one, no exception. That's the Prime Minister's motorcade leaving Westminster.
I now call the Prime Minister.
After telling Parliament he's happy police have decided to investigate what's been called Partygate here.
Because I believe this will help to give the public the clarity it needs and help to draw a line under matters.
Some say the police investigation might buy Johnson some time. The country's already clamoring for the results of a civil servants report commissioned by Johnson himself.
It's a stay of execution potentially for the Prime Minister, but politically it makes the situation, I think, even more toxic for his party.
Scotland Yard has turned its earlier position on its head, initially declining to investigate the Downing Street parties. Here, the police commissioner is explaining the change of heart.
There was evidence that those involved knew or ought to have known that what they were doing was an offence.
The most recent news of a surprise birthday party for Boris Johnson at Downing Street, thrown by his wife during lockdown, won't have helped. On the streets, people are weary, and in Parliament, tempers are still flaring.
Can we please have a sense of proportion over the Prime Minister being given a piece of cake in his own office by his own staff?
So it seems, Mr. Speaker, potential criminality has been found in Downing Street. What a truly damning reflection on our nation's very highest office.
Johnson does have his supporters, and the cabinet is holding so far.
And he's got all the big decisions right.
Not everyone will agree with that. More than 175,000 Britons lost their lives in the pandemic. Analysts say that's why there's so little appetite for forgiveness in the public.
Things can change very, very quickly. So whilst I would say the balance of probability now is that ultimately he will fall, it's not absolutely certain.
And so Britain now awaits not one, but two reports, still locked in the grip of a scandal that won't go away. Margaret Evans, CBC News, London.
A lifelong sailor has used this winter weather to his advantage by dusting off his ice boat after nearly 20 years. We caught up with him as he hit the ice, a ride 2 decades in the waiting.
And this is an ice boat. Specifically, it's a DN. And so they were all made of wood, and this one was handcrafted for me about 25 years ago from a guy in Kingston. I ordered it from him. And so it's a beautiful, it's almost like buying a violin or something like that, 'cause it's like, you know, you don't want it to get wet. You want it to, you want to take care of the wood and all that kind of stuff, right? So I had a couple years when I first got this ice boat that I had it out on the lake and was sailing up and down the lake. Never conditions like we had like last week or even now. Like the lake is super glassy, flat ice underneath the fresh snow we have. And so you have to be a little careful because you can get chunks of ice. The skates on the bottom of it are about, 5 inches tall. So you have to be able to make sure you can go over the chunks of ice and stuff like that. But if you have a big chunk, it could bring that skate. It's like a tricycle, right? There's 3 of them. So it could bring you to a crashing halt. Well, I love sailing, so I started out way back when, in my late teens, early 20s, probably windsurfing. So I really understood the physics of sailing. And actually, this brings me back to my memories as a kid. So this ice boat will go about 3 times faster than the wind. So if the wind is like, let's say 20 miles per hour, I can go 60 on this. I think I have gone before 60. I think the other day I was probably going about 35 to 40. You live your life by the wind when you do this kind of a thing, yeah. And the conditions, and so that's what inspired me to get out. It's like, can't not do it, right? You don't know if this will be here for a day, for a week. You don't know when the mild weather's going to come, and then the days the wind's blowing. So it's really kind of fun, and there's no other people to worry about. The other thing, unlike skiing and snowboarding, which I also do or haven't done for a while, I'm always worried about the young whippersnappers on the slope coming down and knocking me down. And I'm goofy, so I'm backwards, so they're all the other way around, so we can't see each other sometimes. Whereas here, I can see, there's nobody on the ice hardly at all, and you can tell what your conditions are and stuff, so it's really kind of cool.
It is it's a thrill to watch. I mean, my heart is in my throat most of the time he's out there, but it's an absolute thrill to watch, because when the wind is just right, it just, poof, carries that boat.
How cool is that? It's so nice to see people enjoying this weather, taking advantage of it. That just looks so cool. A live look outside there now in terms of the next few days. We've got some flurries in the forecast, some sun, some clouds. Colette will be here. She will give us a look at our weather for the week. Stay with us. Colette Kennedy joins us now for a look at our weather forecast. Colette, it looks like there's a little bit of everything. Sprinkle of chance of flurries, bit of clouds, bit of sun. Talk us through this.
Yeah, a lot going on. You know, our temperatures today well below seasonal. When you're talking about daytime highs around -6, the low -12, we should be closer to a daytime high of about -1 and a low of -9. So we're off the mark a little bit. However, I guess things can always be a little worse. We are not included in the extreme cold warnings that are in place for much of the province, just not quite meeting that criteria, but it doesn't mean it's not going to be a cold night ahead, and tomorrow morning it will be, and you still have to use caution even if there isn't the warning, because exposed skin, and for the kids too, bundling them up, exposed skin can be subject to frostbite. Some weather advisories still having to do with some of the lake effect snows that are blowing there across Lake Huron, coming across Lake Huron and then onto the shore, getting into that snowy activity. Windsor, we're at -7, -10 for Chatham-Kent, and we factor those winds in that we're still seeing, and we get our current wind chill. So in some cases, yeah, it is in the minus teens in terms of how it feels out there, but a little bit of everything. So there's some of that flurry activity or even those streamers showing up there on our radar. A little bit of cloud cover, but we'll be seeing some clearing as we go through the overnight. And in a few cases, we'll have some of that cloud hanging on in the morning, but then it erodes, so there'll be improving conditions in that sense. No big active weather pattern in terms of tomorrow, quieter conditions. There we get into that sunshine as the day wears on. The areas it'll take a little longer will be over towards London. Chatham-Kent, you'll be at times on the line there, but I think there'll be quite a bit of sunshine too. I say no real active pattern, but into Thursday, another front kind of pushing our way. It does mean we'll have quite a bit of cloud cover one little part of the day where we get into some sunny breaks, and then a late day, like into the evening, the chance of some flurries. So I didn't put it in the daytime forecast for Thursday, but know that it's there into the nighttime. Feeling overnight, and by tomorrow morning, like -22, and then the daytime high tomorrow, it's closer to a seasonal low for this time of year. In fact, a little below. Remember, that was -9 was that figure. So there we are tomorrow afternoon. We do have a cold day ahead, even without that warning. Bumps up a little bit into Thursday, and then what I can say that's positive about the weekend, even though those temperatures are quite cold, is we do have more sunshine coming back at us, Katerina.
I'm going to cling to that because all those minus signs made me go, yeesh. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Thanks so much,
yeah,
Paulette.
Oh, boy, oh, boy. We're going to ignore that. You're welcome.
I know. We're going to pretend that that's not a thing. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
When we come back, we're going to go tobogganing, and we're going to learn about how the type of snow that you get can make all the difference. Stay with us. Welcome back. Tobogganing is a time-honored winter activity for many Canadian kids, and there's been no shortage of fresh snow on the ground in many parts of the country lately. You might think that would make it a great day to go sledding, but as Ethan Williams shows us, the type of snow that falls can make quite a difference.
Who knew that snow could be so controversial? While people are heading to the toboggan hill for some sledding, there seems to be a bit of a debate over which type of snow is best for this winter activity. Dry, light, and fluffy, or wet, heavy, and slushy?
So that heavy, wet snow is more compactable, so when you sit on your sled, you compact it, you stay on top, and you're able to stay on top throughout the entire sled run.
So when you're trying to be on a toboggan with that, or when you're trying to ski through it, or when you're trying to get your snowmobile through it, it's really sticky and it's really hard to get through that stuff. So it's actually not slippery at all.
How wet the snow is depends on something called the snow ratio. The lower the ratio, the wetter the snow. For instance, if the ratio is 5:1, that means it takes just 5 centimeters of snow to make a centimeter of water. But if the ratio is 20:1, it would take 20 centimeters of snow for just a centimeter of water.
So we've heard what the experts have to say about the best type of snow, and it's time now to turn this question over to one tobogganing enthusiast.
The slushy and the sticky snow, you're generally gonna move a little slower, right? And then your more dry, hard packed or groomed stuff, you're gonna move a little faster, right? So to say what the best one is might be a little tough, because you might have the parent with their kid on their lap where they're looking to use that wet, slushy, sticky snow and go a little slower, and then you've got maybe the kid that likes to go really fast and he's looking for more of that dry, hard packed and even icy condition.
So at the end of the day, it might come down to personal preference, but our experts do agree on a few things. Stay dry to keep warm, dress in layers, and of course, have fun.
All snow is good snow when it comes to winter activities, really.
The tobogganing lesson we didn't know that we needed. That is it for CBC Windsor News. For news anytime, go to our website at cbc.ca/Windsor. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.